I'm Elliot Antrobus-Holder. Thanks for making some time to listen to me talk about Gilead and our journey. I talked earlier this morning about storytelling, and for the next 15, 20 minutes or so, you're going to hear me tell a story about what we've been doing at Gilead and how we've been using data, AI, machine learning to really increase our level of customer centricity and improve the outcomes for patients, HCPs, and everybody else. And I'm really going to cover three topics. First one is kind of, what was our vision? Why did we do this? Why did we think it was important? Why have we gone this approach? Then secondly, kind of how AI and machine learning are central to all of this. It's been mentioned a few times today that doing this kind of stuff at scale really requires AI and machine learning. So we really took a bold move early on and said, we're going to go all in, we're going to double down, we're going to go data-driven customer engagement, we're going to use AI and machine learning, and I'll talk you through some of the learnings, best practices, what's went wrong, warts and all of everything that's been happening with us over the last 18 months as we've been on this journey. So the reason we took this fairly bold approach really was that Gilead needed to leapfrog. And Gilead's background is we historically have been a single therapeutic area kind of brand, so very focused in virology and particularly HIV. But over the last couple of years, we've grown pretty substantially, made a number of acquisitions in oncology and other therapeutic areas. And the pandemic obviously accelerated the need for this digital-driven customer engagement. So we've been making big investments, decided to do things differently. And much like probably everybody in this room, we decided we need a brand new kind of ecosystem. We want to build customer journeys. We want to be much more personalized. We want to launch new channels. We want to deliver the right message at the right time to the right channel, blah, 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 blah. Everything that everybody else is probably doing. And that sounds brilliant. But everybody's doing that. So we decided to maybe do this in a slightly different way and be very kind of focused, very data-driven, very customer-centric from day one. And one of the questions Dario asked me in the panel first thing this morning, we've decided to be very patient-centric. So we've rooted it in both insights, real-world data, understanding of patient needs, patient journey mapping, and use that to really understand what are those particular pathways, how do we build those journeys through segmentation, and then how do we use data, analytics, and AI to actually deliver those. So we've spent a lot of time over the last year really solving three big challenges. Challenge number one is technology, and not necessarily the biggest problem, but it is a big problem in its own right. So we've had to deploy everything from new CRM systems to data analytics platforms to new channels and websites, because a lot of the basics really weren't in place. There's then been the people challenge of things. So working in completely different ways, being completely agile, completely customer-centric has not been easy. And then finally, the process side of things as well. I massively underestimated, if I'm completely honest, the amount of procedural challenges would take as we went through this process. And we'll come on to this slightly, but I thought I'd share some kind of insights. Firstly, on the technology, and a big shout out to the partners from IQVIA in this room who have helped us enable all of this. It wouldn't have been possible without you. We've rooted NBA at the heart of everything that we've been doing. So we've been building essentially a brain, quite sophisticated brain, using internal and external data sources to drive every single customer interaction. And I think the big difference for us versus a lot of other pharma companies has been that we decided to go next best action in the omnichannel kind of world from kind of day one. We started with reps, much like everybody else, but we've worked very quickly to start plugging in other channels. And that's very much our aspiration, that we want that to become the commercial customer engagement engine for the whole of Gilead. Whether you're a rep, whether you're receiving an email, an invite to a conference or whatever, that should be driven by the AI, and it will essentially be the brain for all customer engagement. So here's essentially what we're doing, is we're taking all of that activity, all that sales data, all that behavioral data, we're putting it into the machine learning and AI engine. That's where the magic happens, and that's then firing out a number of suggestions. Now, we've been looking pretty extensively at trying to work out what's the right customer, what's the right cadence, what's the right channel, what's the right content, and all of those things then learning as they go through to improve this engine and this kind of experience. Now, that's all well and good. The technology's there, all of that's possible. One of the biggest challenges we started to come up with is, one, we didn't have any custom journeys. A lot of our brand teams weren't necessarily thinking in kind of segments, journeys, what activities do we want to happen. So I've spent a lot of time, and this will be very familiar to a lot of you in the room, spent a lot of time with our reps, with our marketing teams, trying to work out for what segment do you want to send what piece of content through which channel at what time. So that was really a pretty big challenge. And a lot of our marketeers, I was quite surprised, weren't even really thinking this way. They were very much kind of big batch campaign, wanted to fire it out all in one go. So that's been a big learning. The other one that I if I'm honest, completely underestimated massively was the need for content. So if you are going to go in this very personalized, customer-centric, data-driven way, the volume of content is huge. The requirement is huge. And when we first started on this journey at Gilead, didn't have the means to create content at this scale. So we've actually had to launch a content kind of factory to not just produce the content, but also own the kind of approval processes to streamline that, to support with campaign development, and basically hold the hands of all of our brand teams as they go through this process. Now, on the people side of things, this is probably where the biggest challenge actually came in, because I remember a conversation with one of our reps fairly early on that basically said, you're going to take my job away. That's why you're here, Elliot. It's to design this AI machine learning thing to take my job away, and I'm not going to be here in 6 months' time. And again, I'm sure that's a familiar conversation a lot of you have had with reps over the years. And we again had to do a lot of storytelling and kind of change management to say, look, it's absolutely not about removing the rep. This is about surrounding you and supporting you with absolutely the right content, with insights, with analytics, helping guide your conversation with those HCPs. It's absolutely not about replacing you with a robot. But it's incredibly useful for those HCPs that we can't get access to. And there's always, in these situations, large volumes of HCPs that we will never get access to face-to-face. And we actually piloted this pretty extensively with one of our teams in the US, where we tested it and proved pretty categorically that where we do adopt this model, that there is both an uplift in calls, an uplift in engagement, and also a pretty significant uplift in prescriptions written, purely because the relevancy is much better. Of course, everybody loves to get the right message at the right time through the channel because it means that you understand them. So that was where it was working really well. We did a number of pilots, we tested it, made sure it works. The next group that were a bit of a challenge, again, our marketeers. And I love our marketeers. I'm an ex-marketeer. But our marketeers had to fundamentally change and are still fundamentally changing as a result of this. So becoming much more data-driven. So our marketeers were very much focused on how do they support the reps, basically? How do they produce CLMs? How do they produce content for the reps, approved emails? Anything but being the strategic marketeer of the future where they're planning kind of customer engagement flows, journeys. So that was a big change for them. And we've gone through everything from training to putting supporting squads in to kind of guide them and lead them. Our final group, who were a bit of a challenge, was our dear senior leaders. Now, I've had some amazing conversations with GMs and senior leaders over the years of this is how we're going to be using AI and machine learning and everything else to completely engage and revolutionize how you engage with your HCPs. And I think they've struggled to get their heads around it. Of just one, how complex this stuff is. I think there's a group of senior leaders who just think, hey, this is just technology, you plug in and it just happens. There's another group then that kind of, I guess, understands it, but don't necessarily know how they're going to action it. So my role there has been very much, again, kind of upward mentoring, I guess, to a certain extent, and kind of bringing them along on that journey. And this is where I think, again, the experiments that we've been doing have been incredibly important. We've taken a very kind of agile mindset to all of this. So how can we kind of roll this next best action program out, this customer-centric, data-driven way of engaging out for a particular brand in a particular territory or country. How can we prove value within kind of 3 or 4 months? And then how can we scale very, very quickly? Again, not a typical kind of Gilead way of working, but has given us those kind of proof points that have been really useful. So, top 3 learnings from me, if I was going to do this all again, would be, 1, back to storytelling. Having a really compelling reason to do this. For us, it tied back to business strategy. We had to do something fundamentally different. We fundamentally believed that data, analytics, AI would be really powerful and helpful for our HCPs, our marketeers, and that we could use that to drive competitive advantage and hopefully leapfrog competition. 2, we were all in for a bold move. Gilead, being kind of a mid, kind of large size pharma now, has the ability to move quite quickly. So we felt that this could be a competitive advantage. And kind of thirdly, was we felt that this was just the right thing to do for patients, for HCPs, for our people. And we felt that by better understanding and using that data would ultimately give a better outcome for everybody. And there we go, whistle-stop tour. If there's any questions, I don't know if we can take questions.
Hi there. Thanks very much for the presentation. One of my questions was around success. So in this kind of really phenomenal engagement that you've done, what was your criteria of success? Was it traditional, such as more prescriptions, more patients, or was it non-traditional? And if it was non-traditional, how did you convince the senior leaders on that fast track of proving success as well with these non-traditional ways?
Yeah, very simplistic. We had a couple of KPIs, really. Number 1 was definitely a traditional KPI. Has this driven sales? Has it helped drive more prescriptions? Has it helped drive up calls? Has it helped drive up engagement with HCPs, kind of as lead metrics ultimately? I guess the less tangible metrics are probably more around, has it helped us drive insights, better understanding of customer behavior? Has it helped patients? They've been more tricky to actually manage and measure, but are probably equally as important as those kind of lead metrics. And I think it's the non-tangible outputs have actually been quite impactful. So I'll give you an example. Within Gilead, we've not been great at kind of agile ways of working and moving at pace and getting stuff done. And it's actually proven to be a really nice example of where we can show through our action of us being kind of nimble, customer-centric, getting stuff done quickly, the value it can bring to the business. So it's been quite nice internally, not just those kind of hard metrics, but the soft metrics of what you can do as a kind of small 2-pizza team moving at pace. That's been a really nice example of that as well.
To see what you've been doing in Gilead. So I have a question around the marketeer side of the spectrum of the story that you've explained. So as I understand, you have moved, or you're moving to a central content production as a group, as a Gilead. So my question would be, so how do you make sure that in the end, the content that you produce is agile and personalized enough that it relates to a customer which is in Belgium and in Croatia and in Hungary or anywhere where Gilead actually is? So, so yeah, if you could maybe elaborate on this a little bit.
Yeah, great question. And I'll answer it in a couple of parts. So I think the role of the marketeer is changing slightly from a more executional role to a more strategic role. So rather than producing campaigns, they are strategizing customer journeys, which is great for the marketeers because they're playing a much more important role. The content factory then, as the marketeer kind of defines that overall customer experience and journey, is then responsible for producing that content. And a lot of it, I'm guessing part of your question is probably how much global to local content are we kind of sharing, because that's part of it as well. So we're encouraging reuse as much as possible. But the more important piece is relevancy at local level for the HCP or patient. We're not going to force anybody to use global content. We'll encourage it, but if it's not the right thing, the content factory is really there to help do that at scale. There's still a very important role for the agency, but if we've got all of these segments and we've got all these kind of customer journeys planned out, it requires content at volume and scale. So the content kind of factory is there to support and really do the heavy lifting on behalf of the marketeer. Now, the impact of that and the evidence of it is kind of just showing through our kind of engagement metrics. But I do think there's still a lot more to do. So we're only kind of 18 months into this journey. We've been launching at real pace. I would expect the volume of content, again, to kind of go up exponentially, and we'll see what happens over time. But we're growing, and it's definitely getting there, and it's positive.
Bart van Proeyen, Quartz. You mentioned that it was like the best thing to do to go this way for the company. But how did you create the burning need in each of the departments to act right now? Because I can imagine that it was not the burning need for them at a certain moment.
Yeah, I would love to say it was easy, and it absolutely wasn't. Obviously, the pandemic helped, but we did go into a number of areas where there was a particular business problem they needed to solve. So was there a launch that we needed to support, and maybe we could design it from ground up from that launch product? Was there a challenge? So we actually launched most of this in the US to start with for a couple of reasons. One, because there was a challenge from a brand perspective that we were losing share. We were having challenges with engagement of HCPs. This actually all happened mid-pandemic, so access was a real challenge. So that was used kind of as the lever almost to get the burning platform built and then rolled out. And then luckily we designed it very successfully that those metrics all look very positive. And then really the lever to get it into the rest of the business and the rest of the brands has been the success that's come from that pilot. So once the success metrics were kind of clear, that was much easier and it kind of snowballed. But yeah, by all means, it wasn't easy to start with. And if I was starting it again right now, I think it would probably be even harder trying to kind of sell that into the business and get it in, because it's a costly and complex process. So we've designed that whole ecosystem and rolled it out all in one go in short succession for one brand, for one country, and then scaled. And I underestimated the scale and complexity of that volume of change. So doing it right now, I think, would be even harder.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Hello. Also, Ruben here from Quartz. One more question about scale and complexity there, what you already mentioned. Finding something that works in one particular geography, in one particular business unit with the set of data that you have available there. You mentioned sales data, behavioral data. How do you extrapolate a success model to other BUs and geographies?
That is a great but very tough question. Thank you. So, one size definitely does not fit all. And for different therapeutic areas, different countries, I think it's important to kind of change the model, the success metrics, the outcomes very substantially. And you're completely right. Very different data requires very different models, very different outcomes and metrics to success. So in each country and with each brand that we're looking at the moment, we'll kind of start from scratch. And then particularly with that kind of brain, different metrics, different data, different algorithms will all be fed in, so it's completely different. So it's almost building it from scratch for each country or for each brand. I think that's quite important, because what works in the US for one of our HIV brands probably won't work in Europe for one of our oncology brands. So that bespoke kind of nature is pretty important. But the channels, that said, so we spent a lot of time kind of rolling out channels and technology that are all consistent. So it's more the brain, the decisioning, the orchestration layer that is the bespoke piece. Okay, fantastic. Thank you.